want to talk a little bit more about your travels. Tell me about some of the places that you enjoy going the most and some of the things that you bring back and actually apply in your design.
Well, this current trip, I'm about to leave in 2 weeks for China, and I know it's going to be mind-blowing because I was in China in 1981 when I was on semester at sea, when there were no cars and it was everybody was on bikes. And I remember at the time, you know, I shot everything in black and white film. I'm a huge amateur photographer. It's a big passion. It's a big passion of mine. I used to spend more time in a dark room, and now with digital, I don't take it to that level. But I don't take pictures as, you know, just a record of where I was, but I really take it as, okay, this is to remind me, this is inspirational, of a pattern, of a color, of a texture, and then I apply that. A few years ago, I was in Morocco. It was actually right after 9/11, and I took my sister and my sister-in-law. It was right after my 40th birthday, and we went, and I remember the vibrancy of the colors, of the blues against the sand. And I came back and I was working on a project, a kitchen remodel in Hilltop, and that palette was translated into that kitchen. Now, the client, she had stained glass windows that had this blue fleur-de-lis, and so between the stained glass that she had and the Moroccan influence that I came back with, we created this wonderful kitchen that I was fortunate to have published a couple of times, and you know, looking at it now years later, it still holds up and stands the test of time. So I think that traveling to these places, I'm traveling to see things that have been around for hundreds of years. And you know, one of the other influences that I think I talk about a lot with clients, because I do a lot of kitchens, and when you travel in Europe and you see these marble countertops that have been in these homes or in these public spaces for hundreds of years, and they look amazing. And then, you know, we have a very different way of living today. And so the first question I always ask when I'm doing a kitchen is, all right, what do you want your countertop to look like? Are you the kind of person that it has to look in 5 years like a showpiece, like the day we finished? Or are you the kind of person that is okay with your countertop telling the stories of your lives? It's a really big difference. And it's okay either way. There's not a right or a wrong. But I need to know, because if somebody wants it to look like a showpiece, then it limits the kind of materials that we can use. And then I would propose a granite. If somebody is okay with the patinas and the weathering and the stories, and I'm not saying that you want a ton of stains, but it's okay to have the stories. Then it opens up that world of, it's okay to use a white marble that you might have seen while you were on a travel in Italy or in France, and it had that patina and it had that aging process. Likewise, you know, concrete's a popular material today for countertops. It only stands up to somebody that is okay having that patina and having those stories, and not the person who wants the showpiece. And these are things that I think, because of my travels and seeing homes and seeing buildings and public spaces that they've been using these kind of materials for a very long time, and seeing how they weather and patina, it makes a difference. I was in Venice a few years ago and took a lot of pictures of mosaic floors and terrazzo floors. And then I came back and I was working on this project that was a 10,000 square foot home that we were building from the ground up. And they wanted to use authentic materials, and they didn't want it to be like what a lot of these, you know, Tuscan, a little bit Disneyland homes are looking like today, where there's a lot of things sort of two-dimensionally stuck on the surface, and they're using so many different surfaces that you're not quite sure what's coming and going. We wanted it to be a little bit cleaner, simpler approach, and have some authentic materials, but done in a fresh way so that it still felt appropriate today. And it was interesting that as I was suggesting some of these things, and you know, we were making these choices, we completed the house. It took a few years. They moved in early last year, or actually, I'm sorry, at the end of last year. And then this summer, they were in Italy and in Pompeii. And when my client came back and called me, and she was like a little kid, she was so exuberant, and she said, I have to tell you, when I saw all these things that you were telling us about and that you used in our home, it made me want to cry. And you know, there's no greater compliment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, that's the question I would have asked you too, so that's a
there
great
you go.
one.
Well, it was really a thrill that when you're trying to educate a client and you're trying to, you know, you educate, but not in that harsh way. I mean, you want to do
Not
it in a way
invasive.
that, right, you don't want to be invasive. You want to be in a way that they are learning, but that they're excited because
Sure.
it's something that they're going to want to live with. And these are, you know, things that you're not going to change out easily. It's not like a paint color that you can repaint or one piece of furniture that you get tired of. But this is, you know, part of the interior architecture of the home. And again, I think it's one of my favorite parts of design. You know, I love doing the decorating, I love doing the furnishing, but when you get to start from the ground up and you're making every decision and choosing every material, and you're you know, it's all about those meticulous details. And I guess that brings me to another point of probably what I take most seriously in this business. I think it's what's most fun, but also what I take most seriously are those details. And whether it's the interior architecture or whether it's the furnishings, the smallest of detail makes the biggest impact. And when it comes to the furniture, I'd like to think of it as being a dressmaker, being, you know, thinking of it as couture clothing. You know, what I'm wearing today is a perfect example that this, you know, tiny little detail sets this apart, and that's how I look at my design. That it's those tiniest of details, that little minutia that you think, oh, you know, does that really matter? Well, absolutely it matters. It matters from every choice that you make to every choice that you don't make. And knowing when to stop and when to pare back, and when you've gone too far. And it's, you know, I think of it as when I get dressed in the morning, and did I put on one too many things? You know, and you always hear that, the fashion advice of
Wasn't
take
it
off
Coco
one,
Chanel?
Coco Chanel that said
Right.
take off, you know, take off one thing. And I think that that's really true. And, you know, when I think about how I got started, it's very funny because I've always been so influenced by fashion. I've had, and I love, I don't know what I love more, clothes, purses, or shoes. It's really a toss-up, but it's all of it put together. And when I decided to go into interior design, I was debating, do I go into fashion, do I go into interiors? I had huge role models in both arenas, and I wasn't sure what to do. And at the time, this was in the early 80s, and men were heavily prevalent in both fields. This was pre-AIDS at the time. I thought fashion was going to be a harder road, and that I would be sewing buttons on a lot longer than it would take me to work my way up into interiors. So I ended up going to New York and going the interior route. And then it's funny because years later, when I decided to go into set design, I had the same conflict. Do I go into set design, or do I go into the wardrobe? Do I go into costume design? And at the time, my oldest brother was working, he was a director and producer on Wonder Years. And I shared with him this dilemma, and he really didn't want me to get into the world of film at all because it's so cutthroat. And what I didn't realize is he had set up for me to have a day with the costumer on Wonder Years. What I didn't know is that he had told her to make sure I hated it. And I spent a day with her. And I didn't hate it, but I did go on to spend a day working on a couple of commercials, and all I was doing was laundry and sewing on buttons. And
Well,
I
that
thought,
would change your mind.
okay,
about
I
it.
think that the set design is a better route, but you know, it was 18, 20-hour days. I mean, it was really
It's
exhilarating.
not glamorous, is it?
Not glamorous. Really exhilarating, but really hard work. And I think that what I came to after a couple of years was that my passion was back here. My passion was in interior design because it was lasting. And not that people don't change things and you want people to change things, but the permanence of it versus what, you know, gets permanently put on a piece of celluloid, but now it's not even celluloid.